The massive ships came from the dark space between stars. They were black as night and larger than Earth's biggest cities. When they appeared in the sky above every major human settlement, people stopped what they were doing and stared up in fear. The Zephyrian Galactic Empire had arrived. Sarah Chen was working in her laboratory at the Lunar Research Station when the first broadcasts began. The aliens spoke perfect English, their voices cold and mechanical through the communication systems. They had been watching humanity for decades, learning their languages, studying their weaknesses. "People of Earth," the voice said, "you are now subjects of the Zephyrian Empire. Resistance is pointless, surrender is your only option." Sarah watched the news feeds from Earth in horror. The human military tried to fight back. Fighter jets screamed through the sky, firing missiles at the alien ships. The weapons exploded harmlessly against shimmering energy shields. Tank shells bounced off like raindrops. Nuclear missiles were simply vaporized by bright beams of light before they could reach their targets. It took exactly 6 hours for Earth to fall. The aliens called themselves Zephyrians. They looked almost human but were taller and thinner. Their skin was pale gray and their eyes were completely black. They had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years, conquering planet after planet with the same brutal efficiency. Emperor Vex Thul appeared on every screen across human space. He was ancient, even by alien standards. Scars covered his face from countless battles. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute power. "Humans," he said, "you are a young species, weak and primitive. But you will serve the Empire well. Those who obey will live. Those who resist will die." The occupation began immediately. Zephyrian ships landed in every major city. Their soldiers marched through the streets in perfect formation. They wore armor that gleamed like mirrors and carried weapons that could burn through solid steel in seconds. Sarah's lunar station was taken over within days. She watched helplessly as alien administrators took control of the mining operations. They forced the human workers to dig deeper and faster than ever before. Anyone who complained was dragged away and never seen again. The aliens had rules. Humans could not gather in groups larger than 5. They could not travel between cities without permission. They could not own weapons of any kind. Children were taken from their families to be educated in Zephyrian schools, where they learned to serve the Empire without question. But the worst part was how easily most humans accepted it. After the initial shock wore off, people went back to their daily lives. They worked in the alien-controlled factories. They followed the new laws. They bowed their heads when Zephyrian soldiers walked by. Not Sarah. She remembered what her grandfather had told her about the old wars on Earth. How humans had fought against impossible odds and won. How they never gave up, even when everything seemed hopeless. She started small. A broken mining drill here, a damaged computer system there. Nothing that would draw attention, but enough to slow down production. Other workers began to notice. Some started helping. Dr. Marcus Webb was a former military engineer who now worked in the asteroid mines. He knew how to make things explode without leaving evidence. Maria Santos was a pilot who could smuggle supplies between stations without being detected. Lisa Park was a medic who treated injured resistance members in secret. Slowly, carefully, they built a network. The Zephyrians had conquered hundreds of species across the galaxy. Most had surrendered immediately when faced with superior technology. Others had fought brief wars before accepting defeat. A few had tried guerrilla tactics for a while before giving up. Humans were different. They kept fighting even when it seemed pointless. Small acts of sabotage happened every day across human space. Supply convoys were attacked. Communication systems mysteriously failed. Important officials found their food poisoned. The aliens could not understand it. Their advanced psychology experts had studied human behavior for years. They knew humans were social creatures who valued survival above all else. Logic said they should accept occupation rather than face certain death. But humans were not always logical. Sarah's group had grown to 30 members, all women. It was not planned that way. It just happened that the women on the lunar station were more willing to take risks. They had less to lose and more anger to fuel their actions. They called themselves the Tycho Cell, after their lunar base. Their biggest success came when they destroyed an entire shipment of rare metals bound for the Imperial fleet. The explosion was visible from Earth. Lieutenant Commander Zektor was the Zephyrian officer in charge of the lunar operations. He was young for his species, only 200 years old. The constant sabotage made him look weak in front of his superiors. Find them, he ordered his security teams. Use whatever methods necessary. The Zephyrians had technology that could track people by their genetic signatures. They had mind-reading devices that could extract information from prisoners. They had torture methods that could break the strongest will in hours. But they had never dealt with humans before. When they captured Tom Bradley, a member of the Resistance, he gave them false information that led to empty warehouses. When they tortured Susan Hill for 3 days, she told them nothing useful. When they threatened to kill random civilians, more people joined the Resistance instead of betraying it. The aliens began to realize that humans were not like other species they had conquered. These creatures seemed to value abstract concepts, like freedom and dignity, more than their own lives. It made no sense from a survival perspective. Emperor Vexthul received reports from across human space. Rebellion was spreading. Production was falling. His other conquered species were starting to ask questions about why such a primitive race was causing so much trouble. Increase security measures, he commanded. Execute any human caught in acts of sabotage. Make examples of them. But the executions only made things worse. Each death created 10 new resistance members. Each public punishment sparked 3 new sabotage operations. The humans seemed to grow stronger with each defeat. Sarah knew it could not last forever. The Zephyrians were too powerful and had too many resources. But she also knew something the aliens did not understand. Humans had a saying, "Give me liberty or give me death." It was not just words. It was how they were built inside. She looked out at Earth through the lunar station's observation deck. The planet looked the same as always, blue and beautiful. But she knew that down there, millions of her people were living as slaves, working in alien factories, following alien laws, raising their children to serve alien masters. The thought made her angry enough to keep fighting. Her team gathered in the old storage bay at midnight. 30 women from different backgrounds united by their refusal to accept defeat. Scientists and soldiers, engineers and teachers, mothers and daughters. Our next target is the antimatter facility on the far side of the moon, Sarah told them. It supplies fuel for their entire fleet in this system. If we can destroy it, we can cut off their expansion into the outer colonies. The women nodded. They all knew it was a suicide mission. The facility was heavily guarded and protected by multiple layers of security. Even if they succeeded, they would never escape alive. But that did not matter anymore. What mattered was sending a message, showing the galaxy that humans would never stop fighting. That freedom was worth any price. They began planning immediately. In 3 days, they would either strike a blow for human independence or die trying. Either way, the Zephyrians would finally understand what they were really fighting against. The antimatter facility stood on the dark side of the moon like a gleaming metal fortress. Towers reached toward the stars, crackling with energy that could power entire fleets. Sarah Chen crouched behind a ridge of lunar rock, studying the target through her binoculars. "Guards patrol every 15 minutes, whispered Maria Santos beside her. "The energy shields drop for exactly 30 seconds during shift changes." Sarah nodded. They had been watching for 3 days, learning the patterns. 30 women against the most secure facility in the solar system. The odds were impossible, but that had never stopped humans before. Dr. Lisa Park checked her equipment one final time. She had built the explosives herself from mining charges and reactor coolant. The devices were crude by Zephyrian standards, but would create a chain reaction that could destroy the entire facility. "Remember," Sarah told her team, "we only need to reach the main reactor. Once these charges detonate, the antimatter containment will fail. The explosion will be visible from Earth." The women moved like shadows across the lunar surface. Years of resistance work had taught them patience and precision. They avoided the sensor arrays and guard posts, using the moon's terrain to stay hidden. Jenny Walsh, barely 19 years old, was their electronics expert. She had learned to hack Zephyrian systems by watching their technicians work. Her fingers flew over a portable computer as she disabled the outer perimeter alarms. "We have a 10-minute window," she whispered into her radio. The facility's main building loomed ahead of them. The architecture was alien but functional, curved walls designed to deflect energy weapons. No windows or weak points visible from the outside, but every fortress had flaws if you knew where to look. Sarah's team had found the maintenance tunnels. They were too small for adult Zephyrians to use comfortably, but perfect for humans. The Resistance had been using similar tactics across human space for months. Inside the tunnel, the women crawled single file through tight spaces. The metal was cold against their hands and knees. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows on the walls. Each woman carried enough explosives to level a city block. They emerged in the facility's lower levels. The hum of massive generators filled the air. Streams of pure energy flowed through transparent tubes above their heads. This was the heart of Zephyrian power in the solar system. Teams Alpha and Beta, take positions near the main reactors, Sarah ordered. Team Gamma, secure the exit routes. We leave together or not at all. But something was wrong. The corridors were too empty. The security was too light. Sarah had expected dozens of guards, multiple checkpoints, layers of protection around such an important facility. Instead, they encountered only a few patrol units easily avoided or quietly eliminated. It felt too easy. Commander Zektor watched from his command center as the human infiltrators moved deeper into the facility. Banks of monitors showed their progress through the corridors. His security teams shadowed them from parallel passages. Weapons ready but orders clear. Let them reach their target. "Should we stop them now, sir?" asked his lieutenant. "No," Zektor replied. "Emperor Vexthul wants them alive. This facility is expendable. We can rebuild it in weeks. But these humans have been thorns in our side for too long." The trap had been months in planning. Zephyrian intelligence had identified Sarah's group as the most effective resistance cell in human space. Rather than simply crushing them, the Emperor had decided to use them as an example. Let them succeed in their mission. Let them believe they were winning. Then capture them and show the galaxy what happened to those who defied the Empire. Sarah's teams reached the main reactor chamber. The room was vast, filled with machinery that hummed with barely contained energy. Tubes of antimatter glowed like captured stars. One mistake here and the explosion would crack the moon in half. "Plant the charges," Sarah ordered. 5 minutes and we extract." The women worked with practiced efficiency. They had trained for this mission dozens of times in abandoned mining shafts. Each explosive was placed precisely to maximize the chain reaction. The facility would be completely destroyed. Lisa Park set the timer on the master detonator. 7 minutes and counting, she announced. That was when the lights came on. Dozens of Zephyrian soldiers emerged from concealed positions. They wore full combat armor and carried stun weapons instead of their usual energy rifles. Their faces were hidden behind helmets, but Sarah could feel their satisfaction. "Humans," announced a familiar voice. Commander Zektor stepped into the chamber, flanked by his elite guards. "You have played your part well, but the show is over." Sarah reached for her sidearm, but stun beams struck her before she could draw it. The energy weapons were designed to incapacitate without killing. One by one, her team members fell unconscious. Around the chamber, the last thing Sarah saw before darkness took her was the timer on the detonator, still counting down, still active. She woke up in a detention cell aboard a Zephyrian cruiser. The walls were smooth metal with no visible joints or openings. A force field hummed across the entrance, occasionally flickering with energy patterns that hurt to look at directly. Her team was in nearby cells. Through the force field, she could see Maria Santos in the cell across from her. The pilot's face was bruised, but her eyes were still defiant. "Did we get it?" Maria asked quietly. Sarah nodded toward the small porthole in her cell. Outside, the Moon was visible in the distance. Where the antimatter facility had stood, there was now only a crater glowing with residual energy. The explosion had been even larger than planned. "We got it," Sarah confirmed. The facility's destruction had crippled Zephyrian fuel production in the solar system. Their expansion plans would be delayed by months. But Sarah knew it had cost them everything. All 30 women had been captured. The Tycho cell was finished. Emperor Vexthul arrived 2 days later. His flagship was massive even by Zephyrian standards, bristling with weapons that could destroy planets. Sarah could feel the ship's engines vibrating through the walls of her. When the Emperor visited the detention block, his presence filled the corridor like a dark cloud. He was taller than most Zephyrians, with scars covering his ancient face. His black eyes showed no emotion as he studied the human prisoners. "So these are the insects that have been stinging my empire," he said. His voice was deep and cold, like winter wind. Sarah stood up in her cell, meeting his gaze directly. She would not show fear in front of this creature. "Defiant to the end," Vexthul observed. "Your species continues to surprise me. Most conquered races learn submission quickly, but humans seem incapable of accepting their proper place." He gestured to his guards. "Interrogate them. Use the neural probes. I want to know everything about their resistance network." The interrogations began immediately. Zephyrian neural probes could extract information directly from a subject's brain, but the process was agonizing. Many species broke within minutes, revealing every secret they possessed. Not humans. For 3 days, the aliens tortured Sarah's team for information. They used machines that stimulated pain receptors directly. They employed drugs that made subjects experience their worst fears repeatedly. They tried psychological techniques that had broken the will of entire civilizations. The women told them nothing useful. When they broke Susan Martinez, she gave them the locations of abandoned safe houses. When they cracked Jenny Walsh's mental defenses, she provided codes that had been changed weeks ago. Even under the most intense torture, the humans protected their comrades. Emperor Vexthul was impressed, despite himself. In 1,000 years of conquest, he had never encountered such resistance to interrogation. These creatures valued their cause more than their own comfort, their lives, or their sanity. It was time to try a different approach. "Prepare the execution arena," he commanded. "I want every human in the galaxy to watch what happens to those who defy the Empire." Sarah was moved to a new cell with a large viewing screen. Through it, she could see construction beginning on a massive platform in space near Earth. The structure was designed for one purpose: public execution on a scale visible across the solar system. "You will die slowly," Vexthul told her during his final visit. "Your screams will echo across every human settlement. Your people will learn that resistance leads only to suffering." Sarah looked at the Emperor with steady eyes. "You think you understand humans, but you don't. We're not like your other conquered species. We don't break, we don't surrender, and we don't forget." Vexthul smiled coldly. "We shall see." The execution was scheduled for the next day. 30 women would die to break the spirit of 30 billion humans. The Emperor was confident it would work. He had no idea what he was about to unleash. The execution platform floated in the void between Earth and Luna, a massive structure of dark metal and glowing energy conduits. It was designed to be seen from both worlds with the naked eye, a monument to Zephyrian power that would cast its shadow across human space forever. Emperor Vexthul stood on the command deck of his flagship watching the final preparations. Banks of communication arrays would broadcast the event to every human settlement in the galaxy. No one would be allowed to look away. Children would be brought from their schools to watch. Workers would be assembled in factory courtyards. Even the miners on the farthest asteroids would see what happened to those who defied the Empire. "The neural dissolution chambers are ready, Your Excellence," reported Commander Zektor. "Each device has been calibrated for maximum pain duration. The subjects will remain conscious for approximately 6 hours while their nervous systems burn out." Vexthul nodded with satisfaction. Neural dissolution was the most horrific death in the Zephyrian arsenal. The machines would slowly destroy brain tissue while keeping victims awake and aware. They would feel every synapse die, every memory dissolve, every thought burn away in agony. It had broken the resistance of 12 different species. Today, it would break humanity. Sarah Chen was brought to the platform in restraints that glowed with energy. Around her, the other 29 women walked with heads held high despite their chains. They had spent their final hours together, saying goodbye and making peace with their fate. "Remember what we talked about," Sarah whispered to Maria Santos as they were led to the execution chambers. "The third verse. Make sure everyone hears it." Maria nodded. They all knew the plan. It was desperate and would probably fail, but it was their last chance to strike back at their captors. The chambers themselves were transparent cylinders filled with neural interface equipment. Each woman would be placed inside while billions watched. The machines would map their brains completely before beginning the slow process of destruction. Across human space, people gathered around viewing screens with dread in their hearts. In New Shanghai, factory workers were forced to abandon their posts to watch. On Mars Colony, children were pulled from their classrooms. In the asteroid belt, miners stopped their drilling to stare at monitors with growing horror. Dr. James Walsh stood in the crowded assembly hall of Agricultural Station 7. Around him, hundreds of humans pressed together in silence. The Zephyrian guards watched from the edges of the room, ensuring no one could escape what was coming. On the screen, Emperor Vexithul began to speak. His voice carried clearly through the communication networks, translated into every human language, simultaneously. "People of Earth and the human colonies," he announced, "you are about to witness the price of resistance against the Zephyrian Empire. These 30 criminals destroyed Imperial property and killed Imperial citizens. Their punishment will serve as a lesson to all who might consider similar acts of defiance." The camera focused on Sarah as she was placed in the first chamber. Her face was calm, showing no fear. Even facing the most horrible death imaginable, she refused to give the Emperor the satisfaction of seeing her break. "Any last words?" Vexthul asked mockingly. Sarah looked directly into the camera. Her voice was clear and strong as she spoke to every human watching across the galaxy. "My name is Sarah Chen. I was born free on Earth, and I will die free among the stars. They can kill our bodies, but they cannot kill what we represent. We are the flame that burns in the darkness. We are the voice that speaks for the silent. We are humanity, and we do not surrender." The Emperor gestured impatiently. The neural dissolution began. Sarah's scream echoed across the communication networks. It was a sound of pure agony, the cry of a human soul being torn apart piece by piece. But even as the machines began their work, she forced herself to speak. "Remember us," she gasped between waves of pain. "Remember what they do here today, and remember that we chose to fight rather than live as slaves." One by one, the other women were placed in their chambers. Each death was broadcast in full detail, showing exactly what happened to those who opposed the Empire. The neural dissolution. Machines worked slowly, ensuring maximum suffering. Dr. Walsh felt tears streaming down his face as he watched. Around him, other humans wept openly. Some collapsed to their knees. A few tried to cover their eyes, but the Zephyrian guards forced them to keep watching. But something else was happening too, something the aliens did not expect. Instead of breaking human spirits, the executions were creating something darker. In every crowd, Walsh could see faces changing. Fear was giving way to rage. Sorrow was becoming fury. The more the women suffered, the angrier the witnesses became. Maria Santos was the 15th to die. As the machines began destroying her brain, she managed to speak in a voice filled with pain but also with promise. "They think this will stop us," she said, "but they're wrong. Every human watching this will remember. Every child seeing this will grow up knowing what the Empire really is. They're not killing our resistance. They're creating it." Her words were cut off by a scream that seemed to go on forever. Emperor Vexthul watched with satisfaction as human after human broke down weeping at the broadcasts. This was exactly the response he wanted: terror, despair, complete submission to imperial will. He failed to notice other reactions in the crowds: the clenched fists, the whispered promises of revenge, the way some humans were looking at their alien overseers with expressions that had nothing to do with fear. Jenny Walsh, the young computer expert, was among the last to die. As the neural dissolution began eating away at her mind, she used her final moments to do what she did best. "I've uploaded something to the communication network," she gasped. "Hidden in the broadcast signal itself. Resistance codes, meeting points, weapon caches, everything you need to fight back." The Zephyrian technician scrambled to find and remove the hidden data, but it was too late. The information had already propagated across the galaxy, embedded in the execution footage itself. Sarah was saved for last. By the time they brought her to the final chamber, 29 of her companions had died horribly. Their screams still echoed in the memories of every human who had watched. "Look at your people," Vexthul told her as the chamber sealed around her. "See how they weep. See how they break. Your sacrifice means nothing. They will serve the Empire forever." Sarah looked at the camera one final time. The neural dissolution. Machines were already beginning their work, sending waves of agony through her nervous system. But her voice was steady and strong. "You're wrong," she said simply. "You don't understand what you've just done. Every human watching this will remember our names. They'll remember how we died. And they'll remember that we chose death over surrender." The pain hit her in waves, each one worse than the last. But Sarah forced herself to continue speaking. "My grandfather told me stories about the old wars on Earth. How humans fought against impossible odds and won. How we never gave up, even when everything seemed hopeless. You think you've broken us today, but you've just reminded us who we really are." Her body convulsed as the machines destroyed more of her brain, but somehow she kept talking. "We are the species that tamed fire and split the atom. We are the children of explorers and warriors. We crossed oceans in wooden boats and reached for the stars in metal ships. We survived ice ages and plagues and wars that should have destroyed us." Each word was an effort now. The neural dissolution was eating away at her memories, her personality, everything that made her human. But Sarah used her final thoughts to deliver one last message. "And now you've given us something new to survive. You've united us in a way we never were before. Every human in the galaxy now knows exactly what the Empire really is. You've turned 30 billion individuals into one, people with one purpose." The pain was becoming unbearable. Sarah's vision was fading as her brain died piece by piece. But she had one more thing to say. "Remember our names: Sarah Chen, Maria Santos, Jenny Walsh, Lisa Park, all 30 of us. We died free, and our deaths will make others free. The Empire ends with us." Her scream joined those of her fallen comrades, echoing across human space as the neural dissolution completed its work. Sarah Chen, leader of the Tycho cell, died as she had lived, defiant to the end. Emperor Vexthul watched the broadcasts from across human space with satisfaction. Everywhere humans were weeping, kneeling, breaking down in despair. The executions had achieved their purpose. But in the crowds, other things were happening. Dr. Walsh felt something change inside him as he watched Sarah's final moments. The fear that had controlled him for 3 years was burning away, replaced by something much more dangerous. All across the galaxy, similar transformations were taking place. Humans who had accepted occupation were suddenly remembering what freedom meant. People who had followed alien orders were starting to ask why they should obey. The 30 women had died believing their sacrifice would matter. They had no idea how right they were. The real war was about to begin. The silence lasted exactly 12 hours after the last scream faded from the broadcasts. Then the galaxy exploded. Dr. James Walsh had returned to his assigned quarters on Agricultural Station 7, officially to mourn and recover from the trauma of watching the executions. Actually, he was building bombs. The station's hydroponics bay provided everything he needed: fertilizer for nutrients, industrial chemicals for processing. Even the power conduits could be rewired to create devastating electrical surges. His hands shook as he worked, but not from fear anymore. He kept seeing Sarah Chen's face in his mind, the way she had looked directly at the camera in her final moments, the certainty in her voice when she said the Empire would end with them. She had been right about one thing: the executions had unified humanity like nothing else could have. Every human in the galaxy now shared the same memory, the same rage, the same purpose. Across human space, the uprising began simultaneously. On Mars colony, maintenance worker Tom Bradley had spent 3 years bowing his head to Zephyrian overseers. Now he stood in the main power plant with a crude explosive device, looking at the alien supervisor, who had beaten human workers for sport. "This is for Sarah Chen," he said quietly, and detonated the charge. The explosion knocked out power to half the colony. In the darkness that followed, 200 humans stormed the administrative complex. They had no weapons except hand tools and fury, but it was enough. By dawn, Mars colony was free. In the asteroid belt, mining ships that had hauled ore for the Empire suddenly changed course. Captains who had followed alien orders for years now turned their vessels into weapons. Cargo holds filled with nuclear waste became guided missiles aimed at Zephyrian installations. Captain Elena Rodriguez piloted her mining ship toward the Imperial patrol station orbiting Ceres. Her hold contained 3 tons of radioactive material from the old Earth reactors. Her crew of 12 had volunteered for the mission, knowing none of them would survive. "For the 30, she whispered as she engaged the autopilot and overrode all safety systems. The patrol station's shields were designed to stop energy weapons and missiles. They had never been tested against a mining ship moving at maximum velocity, with a nuclear payload. The explosion lit up the asteroid belt like a new sun. On Europa, the underwater cities erupted in revolt. Humans who had built the ocean installations with their own hands now used that knowledge to destroy them. Critical life support systems were sabotaged. Structural supports were removed. Entire districts were flooded to kill the alien occupiers. Inside, Dr. Susan Park, sister of the executed Lisa Park, led the assault on the central command hub. She had helped design the facility's safety systems. Now she knew exactly how to make them fail catastrophically. "Lisa died so we could do this," she told her team as they planted charges throughout the structure. "Make her proud." The hub collapsed into the ocean depths, taking 300 Zephyrian administrators with it. The humans escaped through maintenance tunnels they had secretly prepared over months of careful planning. Emperor Vex Thul received the first reports in his command chamber aboard the flagship. Individual acts of terrorism, he thought. Desperate gestures from a broken people. His security forces would restore order within days, but the reports kept coming. Every human settlement was in revolt simultaneously. Colonies that had been peaceful for years were now battlefields. Workers who had served the Empire faithfully were destroying everything they had built. "How is this possible?" he demanded of his intelligence officers. "The executions should have broken their spirit completely." Commander Zektor studied the tactical displays with growing alarm. Red warning lights blinked across the galaxy map, each one representing a human uprising or successful attack on Imperial forces. "They appear to have been planning this for months," he reported. "Hidden weapon caches, secret communication networks, coordinated attack plans. But our intelligence detected none of it. What the aliens could not understand was that there had been no grand conspiracy, no master plan coordinated across the stars. The humans had simply reached a breaking point simultaneously. The executions had not broken their spirits. They had set their souls on fire. The hidden codes Jenny Walsh had embedded in the broadcast were helping coordinate the uprising, but they were not controlling it. Every human settlement was acting independently, striking back in whatever way they could manage. On Earth itself, the rebellion took a different form. The planet was too heavily fortified for direct assault, but humans had other advantages. They knew the terrain, they understood the infrastructure, and they had nothing left to lose. In the ruins of New York, former police officer Mike Thompson led a team through abandoned subway tunnels. They carried explosives made from household chemicals and determination born from 3 years of humiliation. Their target was the Zephyrian command bunker deep under Manhattan. It was supposed to be impregnable, protected by energy shields and automated defenses. But the aliens had not considered that humans might attack from below, through sewers and utility tunnels that did not appear on their maps. Sarah Chen died so we could be here, Thompson reminded his team as they placed their charges. Don't let her down. The bunker's destruction killed the regional governor and his entire staff. More importantly, it knocked out communications across the eastern seaboard, leaving thousands of Zephyrian troops cut off from their commanders. Dr. Walsh's agricultural station was one of hundreds that erupted in violence that day. The humans had spent months secretly converting farming equipment into weapons. Crop harvesters became mobile gun platforms. Irrigation systems were modified to spray corrosive chemicals. Even the livestock had been weaponized with biological agents that could kill aliens but not humans. The station's commander, a Zephyrian officer named Veltar, had considered the humans completely pacified. He was reviewing production reports when the first explosion shook the administration building. What was that? He demanded of his aide. The answer came in the form of armed humans storming through the doors. They carried farm tools and improvised weapons, but their faces showed the same determination that had carried their ancestors across continents and between stars. Dr. Walsh led the charge, an explosive device in each hand. "This is for everyone who died today," he said. "This is for Sarah Chen and her team. This is for humanity." The battle was brief, but brutal. The Zephyrians had superior weapons and training, but they were outnumbered 50-1 by humans who no longer cared about their own survival. When it was over, the station was in human hands. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. Humans who had been model citizens under the occupation suddenly revealed themselves as dedicated rebels. Workers became soldiers. Farmers became bomb makers. Scientists became saboteurs. The Zephyrian response was swift and predictable. Orbital bombardments began within hours. Entire settlements were destroyed from space to make examples of the rebels. Thousands of humans died in retaliatory strikes meant to restore Imperial authority, but the bombardments only made things worse. Each destroyed settlement created martyrs. Each dead civilian became a rallying cry for more violence. The Empire's standard tactics of fear and intimidation were backfiring completely. On Titan, the methane processing facilities had been taken over by workers led by former engineer David Park, brother of both executed Lisa and rebel Susan. The complex was critical to Imperial fuel production, but David's team had turned it into a fortress. When Zephyrian warships arrived to retake the facility, they found it defended by humans using industrial equipment as weapons. Methane tankers had been converted into guided missiles. Processing towers had become sniper nests. The entire complex was booby-trapped with explosives that could destroy the moon's atmosphere. "Surrender and you will be allowed to live," announced the Imperial commander over the communication system. David's response was broadcast across the solar system. "We already died 3 years ago when you conquered our worlds. Today we choose how to spend our deaths. Come and take us." The siege lasted 6 days. When Imperial forces finally broke through, they found the facility completely destroyed and every human defender dead. But the battle had tied up 3 full battle groups that were desperately needed elsewhere. Emperor Vexthal realized he was facing something unprecedented in the Empire's history. A species that valued abstract concepts like freedom and dignity more than their own survival. Creatures who would destroy themselves rather than accept defeat. "Deploy the extermination fleets," he ordered. "If humans cannot be controlled, they will be eliminated completely." But even that decision came too late. The uprising had spread beyond human space. Other conquered species had watched the broadcasts of Sarah Chen's execution. They had seen humans choose death over slavery. Now they were asking themselves why they had accepted Imperial rule so easily. On Kepler 442b, the native Aquarian species began their own rebellion, using tactics copied from human transmissions. On Wolf 359, the crystalline Vorthon stopped there, mineral production, and demanded independence. Across the galaxy, species that had been model imperial subjects for centuries were suddenly questioning their status. The 30 women executed above Earth had intended to inspire human resistance. Instead, they had sparked a galactic revolution. The breakthrough came from the most unlikely source imaginable: nuclear waste. Dr. James Walsh crouched in the ruins of his agricultural station, studying readings on a handheld scanner. Around him, the wreckage still smoldered from the Imperial bombardment 2 days earlier. Most of his team was dead, but those who survived had made a discovery that would change everything. "The radiation is interfering with their shields," he reported to the hidden communication network that now connected human rebels across the galaxy. "Old fission byproducts from our 20th century reactors. Their energy barriers can't filter it out." It was almost laughably simple. The Zephyrian Empire had conquered hundreds of worlds and faced thousands of different weapons: energy blasts, projectile rounds, chemical explosives, biological agents. Their technology could counter them all. But they had never encountered a species primitive enough to still have nuclear waste lying around. What the aliens saw as humanity's greatest weakness was actually their secret weapon. Captain Elena Rodriguez had survived the destruction of the Ceres patrol station and now commanded a growing fleet of converted mining ships. Her latest vessel was the Defiance, a massive ore hauler packed with radioactive material from decommissioned power plants. "Target the flagship's shield generators," she ordered her gunner, a former accountant named Mike Chen who had learned to aim by watching his sister Sarah die. "Let's see how their precious energy barriers handle some good old-fashioned uranium." The makeshift weapons were crude, but effective. Nuclear waste packed into mining charges and fired from industrial launchers. The Zephyrians' advanced shields, designed to deflect coherent energy beams, could not process the chaotic radiation signatures. The radioactive slugs punched through like the barriers were not even there. Imperial ships that had seemed invincible suddenly found themselves vulnerable to attacks from converted garbage haulers and agricultural transports. The technological advantage that had given the Empire control of the galaxy was neutralized by humanity's own obsolete debris. Emperor Vexthal watched his fleet reports with growing disbelief. Ship after ship was falling to what should have been harmless civilian vessels. His most advanced warships were being destroyed by creatures using nuclear technology that was older than his own civilization. "How many ships have we lost?" he demanded. 47 capital vessels in the last week, reported Admiral Kexmore. "The humans have learned to target our shield generators specifically. Once those are down, their conventional weapons can damage our hulls." The Emperor's scarred face twisted with rage. "Deploy more ships. Crush them with overwhelming numbers." But the Zephyrian fleet was not infinite. Hundreds of worlds needed garrison forces. Rebellion was spreading to other species inspired by human defiance. Every ship sent to fight humans was one less available to maintain order elsewhere. On Mars Colony, now completely under human control, former physicist Dr. Susan Park worked frantically in a converted laboratory. She was Sarah Chen's cousin, and she carried her family's talent for engineering alongside their gift for rebellion. "The key is dispersal," she explained to her team as they assembled another batch of nuclear devices. "We don't need massive explosions. Small amounts of fissile material scattered by conventional charges will contaminate their ships for months." Her dirty bombs were works of art in their simplicity. Smoke grenades filled with plutonium dust, artillery shells packed with cesium powder, even hand grenades loaded with americium from old smoke detectors. Each weapon turned Zephyrian technology against itself. The aliens' recycled air systems spread the contamination throughout their ships. Their advanced medical scanners detected the radiation but could not filter it out. Crews that survived human attacks often died slowly from radiation poisoning over the following weeks. It was a horrible way to fight a war, but Sarah Chen's execution had taught humanity that their enemies understood only horror. The time for mercy had ended when 30 women died screaming above Earth. The tide began turning when human rebels captured their first intact Imperial warship. The Zephyrian cruiser, Dominator, had suffered engine failure during a raid on the Jupiter system. Captain Rodriguez led a boarding party armed with nuclear waste and desperate courage. The ship's crew fought fiercely, but they had never faced enemies who treated death as an acceptable outcome. Humans charged through energy barriers that should have stopped them, absorbing lethal doses of radiation to plant bombs in critical systems. When the battle was over, Rodriguez stood on the bridge of humanity's first captured starship. The controls were alien, the displays unreadable, but her engineering team was already learning. Within days, they would have their own Imperial-class weapons. "Strip everything useful," she ordered. "Weapons, shield generators, navigation systems. Then we load this thing with nuclear waste and ram it into their next fleet." But they discovered something even more valuable than technology. The ship's computer contained detailed star charts showing Zephyrian installations across the galaxy, defense grids, supply routes, even the location of Emperor Vexthol's fortress world of Kethavar Prime. The information was transmitted to every human settlement within hours. Rebels who had been fighting blindly now knew exactly where to strike. The Empire's own captured intelligence guided humanity's revenge. The assault on Kethavar Prime began 6 months after the executions. A ragtag fleet of converted human ships, their hulls scarred and their crews driven by pure hatred, emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Imperial capital system. They were outnumbered 100 to 1. The planet's defenses included orbital battle stations that could destroy entire fleets. Elite guard squadrons protected the Emperor's stronghold with ships that outclassed anything humanity possessed. It should have been a massacre. Instead, it became the Empire's final defeat. The human fleet split into dozens of smaller groups, each targeting different aspects of the planetary defense network. They used tactics no civilized species would consider: ramming attacks, suicide runs, weapons designed to spread maximum contamination rather than achieve clean kills. Captain Rodriguez led the main assault, her flagship loaded with every piece of nuclear waste the rebellion had collected. The ship was more radioactive bomb than vessel, held together by determination and prayer. "Remember the 30, she broadcast to her fleet as they closed on the orbital stations. "Remember Sarah Chen. Remember why we fight." The Zephyrian defenses fought back with devastating effect. Human ships died by the dozens, their crews choosing to ram enemy positions rather than retreat. Nuclear fire bloomed across the system as converted mining vessels collided with Imperial battle stations. But the defenders had never faced an enemy that considered mutual destruction a victory. Each human ship that died took critical Imperial installations with it. The orbital defense grid cracked under the weight of opponents who refused to preserve their own lives. Emperor Vexthal watched from his palace as his capital's defenses crumbled. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The human rebellion had spread to every corner of the Empire. Other species were joining the revolt. Entire sectors were declaring independence. "Evacuate the palace," he ordered his guards. "Prepare my personal escape ship." But it was too late. The palace's shields were already failing under bombardment from human vessels that should never have reached the planet's surface. Crude nuclear weapons were punching through barriers that had protected the Emperor for centuries. The final assault was led by Maria Santos, sister of the executed pilot. She had survived the rebellion's early days to command a strike team armed with humanity's deadliest weapons. Her target was simple: the Imperial throne room itself. The palace guards fought with the desperation of soldiers who knew their cause was lost. Energy beams filled the corridors as the two forces met in brutal combat. But the humans kept coming, pushing forward through casualties that should have stopped any sane army. Maria reached the throne room just as Vexthal was preparing to flee. The Emperor, who had ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years, now faced a human woman carrying a nuclear device she had built herself. "You killed my sister," she said simply. "You killed 30 of our best. You thought that would break us." The Emperor raised his personal weapon, a plasma rifle capable of melting through starship armor. "You cannot defeat the Empire. There are billions of us across the galaxy." Maria smiled grimly. "There used to be 30 billion of us. You've killed half the human race in the last year." But that just made the survivors twice as angry. She activated the nuclear device. The explosion that followed was visible from orbit, a pillar of fire that consumed the Imperial Palace and everyone inside it. The emperor, who had thought himself immortal, died to humanity's most primitive technology. The news of Vexthol's death spread across the galaxy within hours. Imperial forces that had fought desperately to maintain order suddenly found themselves leaderless. Local commanders began surrendering or fleeing back to their homeworlds. The rebellion that had begun with 30 women dying in space ended with the Empire's complete collapse. Species that had been enslaved for millennia declared their independence. Worlds that had served the Empire for generations turned on their former masters.